Britain and the United States have raised fears that Russia has shared nuclear secrets with Iran in return for Tehran supplying Moscow with ballistic missiles. During their summit in Washington, D.C. last week, Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer and US President Joe Biden acknowledged that Iran and Russia were tightening their military cooperation. This was at a time when Iran is in the process of enriching enough uranium to complete its long-held goal to build a nuclear bomb. On Tuesday last week, Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, made a similar warning on a visit to London with his British counterpart David Lammy. For its part, he said, Russia is sharing technology which Iran seeks. This is a two-way street, including on nuclear issues. Britain, France and Germany then jointly warned last week that Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium had continued to grow significantly without any credible justification. They also added that Iran had accumulated 4 significant quantities that each could be used to make a nuclear bomb. So on Crux Decode, why would Russia be happy with a nuclear Iran? After all, a nuclear Iran would destabilize the Middle East. It's a place where Russia has huge stakes, particularly in Syria. Are Russia and Iran engaging in a trade-off where Iran supplies Russia with drones and missiles to bomb Ukraine, and in return, Russia gives Tehran nuclear expertise to help build a bomb? It is not clear how much technical know-how Tehran has to build a nuclear weapon at this stage, or just how quickly it could do it. Working with experienced Russian specialists or using Russian nuclear knowledge would help speed up the manufacturing process. Iran had struck a deal in 2015 to halt making nuclear weapons in exchange for sanctions relief from the United States and other Western countries. But that agreement was abandoned in 2018 by the then US President Donald Trump. Iran responded by breaching the agreed limits on the amount of enriched uranium it could process. The Western concern is that Iran is so close to being able to make a nuclear weapon, and that's been circulating for months, contributing to the tensions in the Middle East. And this is on top of the Israel-Hamas and Israel-Hezbollah tensions, which are already at fever pitch. Iran and its proxy in Lebanon, Hezbollah, are both supporters of Hamas, and Tehran's nuclear development is therefore being viewed as a direct threat by Israel. Soon after Vladimir Putin launched the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Iran began supplying the Shahid drones to Moscow. It helped Russia build a factory to make more bombs to send across to Ukraine. In April of this year, Iran launched a Russian-style missile and drone attack aimed at Israel, although much of it was intercepted and destroyed. Russia and Iran, though they've not historically been allies, have become increasingly united in their opposition to the West. It's also part of a wider axis of upheaval, which also includes China and North Korea. This is in many ways a return to the days of the Cold War. Also, America has opined that US intelligence had concluded that the first batch of high-speed Iranian Fatah 360 ballistic missiles with a range of up to 75 miles had already been delivered to Russia. And this has prompted a dramatic reassessment in Western thinking about the level of cooperation between Tehran and Moscow. According to the United Nations International Atomic Energy Agency, the Islamic Republic of Iran currently has sufficient uranium that is enriched to 60% to build 3 nuclear weapons if it decides to do so. Building a nuclear bomb would provide Iran with unprecedented diplomatic and military leverage in the Middle East. The ongoing war in Gaza could also provide Ayatollah Khamenei's regime with the opportunity to cross the nuclear threshold. The Iranian leadership perceives this war as stretching Israeli military resources to the limit, while US diplomatic focus and military resources are being stretched thin in fighting the Houthis in Yemen and, of course, Iran's proxies in Syria and in Iraq. At the same time, the United States is also committing financial and military assets to support Ukraine and Taiwan. So consequently, the Iranian leadership could conclude that the US and Israel, right now, at this given point of time, given all that they've been preoccupied with, lack the military resources to attack Iran's nuclear facilities. That's another reason why the Iranian leadership may decide to cross the nuclear Rubicon, because a nuclear Iran may no longer be viewed as a threat by Russia or China or any of the other non-partisan countries or non-aligned countries. Before Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine back in February of 2022, a nuclear-armed Iran was not in Russia's interests. First, because it risked starting a nuclear arms race in the Middle East, and that would threaten Russia's diplomatic and economic interests in the region. Regional stability is particularly important for Russia. Second, the minimum distance between Iran and Russia is approximately 650 kilometers. Iran's missiles can easily cover that distance. So understandably, the Russians did not want their southern border to be threatened by a nuclear-armed Iran. Third, Iran would also increase American commitment and presence in the Middle East if it were to acquire nuclear weapons. The Kremlin, which sees the US as a fundamental rival for regional influence in the Middle East, has always looked disapprovingly at the presence of America in the Middle East. Lastly, both Iran and Russia are rivals in places like Syria and the Caucasus. Nuclear weapons could potentially boost Iran's hand in its rivalries with Moscow. But in the post-Ukraine war era, a nuclear-armed Iran may in fact be in Russia's interests. A nuclear-armed Iran could offer Russia at least one of the advantages that a nuclear-armed North Korea has provided China. That is, increased diplomatic importance. A study by the Stanford University says that the heightened threat of North Korean missile attacks incentivizes both Japan and South Korea to avoid alienating Beijing. They are hoping that China will keep Pyongyang in check. In the case of a nuclear-armed Iran, the same could apply to Russia. To counter Iran's threats and its influences, Middle Eastern countries would have to prioritize further improving ties with Moscow. That would significantly increase Russia's influence and its leverage in the Middle East. A nuclear-armed Iran would also be economically and politically isolated. That would enable Russia to have more control over Iran, particularly its economic resources like oil and gas. Russia also intends to invest about $40 billion in Iran's oil and gas sector. Iran and Russia have already signed a $6.5 billion deal as part of this investment program. Despite becoming a nuclear-armed state, Iran would still be dependent on Russia diplomatically and politically. As a nuclear-armed Iran is likely to incur the diplomatic and economic wrath of the United States and its Western partners, having close ties with Moscow will remain a crucial interest for the Iranian leadership. In fact, relations could become even closer. Because of Iran's crucial military support to Russia, post-war Ukraine will be against the Iranian regime. Kiev could likely turn into a center for forces that are aligned against the Iranian regime. And to counter this, the Iranian regime, particularly its intelligence apparatus, would need help from Russia for intelligence gathering and to spy on what's happening in Ukraine.